Welcome to day 2 of WTC 2022. I love a good story, and if you're like me, today is going to be extra special. For today's opening session, we'll be hearing from friends in the tourism and travel industry who will be sharing personal stories on what it means to redefine tourism success. Without further ado, let me introduce to you our keynote presenter for today, Mr. Gary Bauman, the Director of Check-in Asia. Mr. Bauman is an experienced Asia travel, tourism and consumer trends analyst. Based in Kuala Lumpur since 2010, he previously lived and worked in Shanghai. A member of the World Tourism Network and Mekong Tourism Advisory Group, Gary has worked with leading hotel groups, tourism boards, OTAs and travel organizations. A regular media commentator on Asian travel, economics and tourism issues, Gary has spoken at various travel industry conferences and webinars, including events in Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Beijing, Shanghai, London, Madrid, and now we can add Kota Kinabalu to that list. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gary Bauman.
Good morning, everybody. Selamat pagi. How are you doing? Are you ready for day 2? Did you enjoy day 1? Have you had your breakfast? Very important question in Malaysia. Have you had your breakfast? So, the power of narratives for revitalizing tourism. What's a narrative? It sounds one of those buzzwords, right? A friend of mine based in Kuala Lumpur, a videographer, photographer, put together this beautiful image for me. It's a tapestry, it's a montage of mini narratives that we see and we experience every day in travel and tourism. These are all from across Asia. And I wanted to try and explain why we're talking about narratives. Can I get the clicker? Green? Green one, okay. So I want to talk about narratives. And narratives, basically, we hear a lot about storytelling in travel. You know, how do we connect with travelers? How do we connect with consumers? But storytelling is a bland and it's an umbrella term. Narratives is how we make direct connections with the people that are most important in travel. We're not the most important people in travel. The most important people are the travelers themselves, the consumers, the people who buy our products and our services, the people who travel. So we heard a lot yesterday about the pandemic. We heard a lot about recovery. We heard a lot of statistics, a lot of numbers. One of the things the travel industry does very, very well is we talk to ourselves. We tell ourselves, we encourage ourselves, and we use a lot of numbers. You know, we use a lot of percentage figures. We use millions of visitors. But the interesting thing with consumers and with travelers, every single traveler has their own unique and individual narrative, their own way of traveling, their own understanding of what it means to go to another country, to experience another culture, to taste new cuisines, to enjoy life away from home. Now, one of the things that has changed before the pandemic, but certainly during the pandemic, is this greater integration. We tend to think that travel and tourism is its own unique ecosystem. Yeah, all we talk about is travel and tourism. But it's not really about that anymore. Travelers, particularly here in Asia, are changing, and they are talking about lifestyle. They're talking about the lifestyle economy. And travel and tourism is intrinsic to the lifestyle economy. Now, why is that? It's because travel over the 2010s, you saw it yesterday, upward curves. Travel and tourism growth throughout the region from 2010 through 2019 was an upward curve. But at the same time, consumption, retail, fashion, wellness, cosmetics, all of these industries as well at the same time were growing equally as fast. And what happened was that these super apps that we carry on our phone, super apps started in China. There's 4 very famous super apps: WeChat, Meituan, Fliggy, and Ctrip, known here as Trip.com. They started to integrate travel with shopping, with entertainment, with streaming, with gaming, with metaverse. We had a presentation on the metaverse yesterday. Making everything lifestyle, not just travel and tourism. We started to see super apps come into our region now. We have Grab, which started here in Malaysia, moved to Singapore. We have GoTo, Indonesia. We also have AirAsia. Anybody here from AirAsia? Silence. Wow. AirAsia is also building a super app, and it's probably the one that is most integrated into travel. GoTo and Grab started from ride-hailing, moved into e-commerce, e-shopping. They don't really do travel quite as well, but AirAsia, obviously, from its background, is a travel brand. So let's get back to narratives. And as we're recovering, it's not just all about numbers. It's not just all about percentage growth. It's about how do we connect with travelers. And I would say during the 2010s, consumer brands, retail brands, fashion and wellness, cosmetics, beauty, they all learned to connect much better with consumers than the travel industry did. We were focusing on growth. Everything was upward growth. And in the travel industry, we became very digitally complacent. We didn't see enough investment, we didn't see enough innovation, and we didn't see enough enterprise. Now, during the pandemic, that's all changed, and we hear a lot about digital transformation. But to be honest, In travel and tourism, we've been talking about digital transformation for 10, 20 years. Why is it happening now? Okay, the reason it's happening now is because we have to connect with travelers again. We have to learn to make those narratives that connect us directly to the people that travel. So, how do we do that? Well, we have videos, we have promotions, we have events, we do road shows, we try to connect with people. But a lot of what we do is aggregated. We talk a lot about aggregation. We talk about, I don't know, business travelers, leisure travelers, family travelers. We talk about Chinese travelers. We talk about Muslim travelers, Indian travelers. We talk about slow travelers, sustainable travelers. These are all labels. We talk about Gen Z. We talk about Alpha generation. We talk about millennials. And I think when we listen to ourselves talking, we're assuming, we make a lot of assumptions that people within these categories behave the same, or they behave similarly. And yet we know that they don't. We know that they don't. Just because you're a Gen Z doesn't mean you behave in a Gen Z way. And that's one of the things that the travel has now worked out as we go into this new era, is that people's perceptions have changed. I think one of the speakers yesterday said that consumers have become more discerning, they've become more choosy, they've become more selective. They are also saturated with information on their phones. There is so much digital marketing out there. So how do we actually cut through? How do we actually make direct connections? Now, I've come up with some ideas. These are 6 narratives that I would like to hear more of, because I think they actually represent where travel and tourism in this region is right now and where it may go in future. So the first one, let me just say this before I go. This picture was taken here in Sabah in February. So I'm using this as a graphic narrative as we go through. It's a beautiful sunset taken from just down the road. I was here in February, and it's great to be back in Sabah. It's such a beautiful destination. And thank you for last night. That was a fantastic event. I think we all enjoyed that. So the insider voice. Who's this guy? Guy taking a picture, taking a selfie. This guy is a tour guide in Vietnam. But he's not just an ordinary tour guide. This guy used to be a logger. He used to actually decimate the forests that he is now guiding tourists around. So he's being trained by a company in Vietnam. There's 250 ex-loggers are being trained to take tourists around the rainforest. Now, he knows intimately all the details about this rainforest because he used to select the trees that he was going to chop down. Now, this is really personal travel. He understands the mentality of poachers, so he actually helps protect the heritage trails. Now, I would love this guy to write a blog, because I'd be fascinated to hear everything that he says. I'd love to take a tour with this guy. When I go to Vietnam, I'm going to take a tour with this guy. But this is the kind of connection I want more from in travel and tourism. I want to see more of guys like this that have new ways of looking at travel and tourism from a completely different perspective, and they can actually show us different ways to travel and understand the places that we're enjoying. The augmented voice. Wow, augmented. We hear a lot about this. We hear about extended reality, metaverse, virtual reality, mixed reality, cross reality. What do they all mean? Lizzie. Anybody know Lizzie? Have you met Lizzie? Silence. Okay. Lizzie is a new virtual influencer created by the Korean Tourism Organization. She's not real, of course. She's computer generated. So she has her own personality. Now, virtual idols, virtual influencers, not particularly new. We did see them before the pandemic, but they are taking on a new, more human-like and more engaging persona. Anybody here shop online for 11/11? Yeah? 11/11, Singles Day. World's biggest online shopping festival started in China. This year, virtual idols or digital idols were the hot topic. All the brands were using digital idols to promote and to engage and to narrate their brand messaging. They were connecting with younger people. As Mr. Yusno said yesterday, metaverse is a little bit contentious. Augmented reality is a little bit contentious. But with younger people here in Asia, it's reality. It is what they are enjoying to do. And it's not just about gaming. Branding is using augmented reality in new ways. And it can be done in travel and tourism. Lizzie travels every single day to a different destination around South Korea, and she engages through social media with younger followers. The interesting thing about a virtual influencer is you actually have power over your influencer. If consumers say, we don't like that, we didn't like what she did there, you can automatically change her. You can change her personality, you can change her dress, you can change her style, you can change her words, you can change her attitude. It's a very flexible format to narrate what you want to do. The experienced voice, what does that mean? Everybody's experience, right? Not necessarily. This is Taiwan, and this is the Golden Years Project. Taiwan is one of the only countries in our region that is actively reaching out and promoting to senior travelers, older people. Why are they doing that? Good reason. You may have read recently that there are now officially 8 billion people on our planet. By 2030, I think about 8.5 billion people. So more people. But in our region in particular, there are more people, and more people are getting older. Populations are aging quite rapidly here. Now, these statistics, I won't go through them, but countries that are aging quite fast, in particular China, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, and Japan. Now, these countries are having to rethink absolutely everything. Singapore and Japan are talking about a new concept called ageless societies. Ageless, not aging, ageless societies, where you make it older people have much more opportunity. They have much more spending power. They can work beyond the retirement age. They can travel more. They can do more. They have more access to technology. Now, this is something we're going to have to integrate much more into travel and tourism. We talk a lot about the Gen Z, millennial generation as the future of travel, but there will be more older people in future in our region, and they will be traveling, and we have to look at how we engage those. The live voice. Who here uses live streaming? Wow. Couple, not much. You will be. Live streaming started in China. It started out about 7 or 8 years ago as a direct-to-consumer sales platform. You had these young people who would stand in front of banks, of backlit smartphones, and they would just sell online. They would sell mostly cosmetics, beauty products, tech gadgets, and it became a massive phenomenon, and it created superstars. I don't know if any of you ever heard of Via Huang or Li Jiaqi. These are super influencers, super live streamers. They became very, very powerful in the consumer industry because they had the ability to connect with young people. Now, when you're live streaming, it's not just sales. People can actually interact during the event. There's entertainment. You can put emojis. You can put comments on screen. It's a very interactive participation. So that's how live stream started. But it's changed completely. And during the pandemic, it changed about 360 degrees. So many Chinese travel brands are now using live streaming as a distribution platform for hotel rooms, for airline products, tour packages, that kind of thing. Also using it for virtual tours, also using it for ways to engage with people, just to have fun online. It wasn't much fun during the pandemic, but live streaming was. Now, Ctrip, or ctrip.com, they said that during 2021, last year, travel in China was down. We know that it's not open yet, but people were still thinking about travel. So how could Ctrip engage people to think about future travel? They had 3,000 of their travel industry partners, 3,000, host more than 10,000 live streams last year to connect with travelers and to pre-sell future travel packages. They made a lot of money. Now, these travel packages are going to be honored. Until China reopens, these travel packages, domestic and internationally, will be honored. So you will actually start to see more of this. Now, live streaming has actually started to come into Southeast Asia a little bit. We're starting to see some brands use it, but we haven't really seen it much in travel yet. But live streaming, it's a really cheap format. It's difficult to do well. It's easy to do badly. But it's a huge way to narrate, and it's a huge way to engage young people. The organic voice. Food. Everybody's talking about food and culture and tourism. We had some presentations about it yesterday. We discussed food. It's so important. Food is really perhaps the most powerful tool for young people particularly, but not just, to connect with the culture, with people, and with the lifestyle of the destination they're traveling to. This picture here is a very small kiosk diner in Vietnam. It opened about 8 years ago. Now, the interesting thing about this, Vietnamese very, very famous for food. It's in a rice paddy, so it overlooks, it's got beautiful scenery, but it actually serves vegan Vietnamese food. Now, Vietnam not really known for vegan food. During the pandemic, it became a real getaway. It's in the Mekong Delta. It's about an hour and a half from a big city. And what it enabled people to do was to go, try some new food, sit and talk to each other, and look out over scenery. It sounds a pretty simple, organic concept, but it became very, very popular. Now, where Vietnam probably will try to use this in future, this was for domestic travelers who couldn't travel overseas. But this is the kind of concept that goes viral very, very quickly. If you're on Instagram, short video apps, this kind of thing is what people are looking for. Organic, I don't like the word experience, but it is an organic experience. And it's food-based, it's culture-based, it's a good way to interact and meet locals. As I said, travel and tourism is a force for connection and inclusion. And there are two ways that the travel industry tends to look at food and culinary tourism. One is the Michelin star effect. The other is the Anthony Bourdain effect. Now, what do I mean by that? Cities around Asia over the last decade, think of Shanghai, Beijing, Singapore, Taipei, Seoul, Bangkok, and from this year, Kuala Lumpur and Penang, have had their own Michelin guides. And it's really generated upscale dining. If you look at Japan, for example, Tokyo now has more three Michelin-starred restaurants than Paris, which is phenomenal. But it has really driven travelers from China to Japan because they really want to go and experience authentic and really good quality Japanese food. And the Michelin Guide basically packages that and allows people to choose where they want to go. So that's one side of travel and tourism. It's almost like the tourism guide side of food culinary tourism. Then you have the Anthony Bourdain effect. Everybody knows Anthony Bourdain, right? Former chef, became an international superstar as a TV host. He would travel all around the world, travel a lot into this region, into Malaysia, to Vietnam, into Thailand. And he used food as a different way. He didn't really use it as a travel mechanism, and he wasn't promoting travel. He used it as a way to engage with people, with cultures, with ideas, with politics, anything that you find when you go to a new country. It's much more emotional. Now, for Asian travelers, that's very important. Food is a very emotional and an emotive issue. So I think we're veering both ways. We are definitely moving towards the Michelin starred effect, and when the new Michelin Guide is launched in Kuala Lumpur, I think it's next month, you will see a surge of interest and activity. But we're also moving down towards the Anthony Bourdain effect, where you want to find out more about the culinary backstory. You don't just want to photograph and see what's on your plate. You want to know about the ingredients. You want to know about the chef. You want to know about where the produce was produced. You want to go and meet the farmer. You want to find out what kinds of ways he nurtures special ingredients, the backstory. About 4 years ago, I was in Spain for La Tomatina. I don't know if you know La Tomatina. Anybody know that? Tomato throwing festival. There's a small town near Valencia where once a year people just throw tomatoes at it. It's a historic festival. And I was there with some Chinese media, and I was asking them afterwards if they enjoyed it. They said, yeah, it was okay, it was fun, a bit predictable. But what they enjoyed the most, and this is actually true, 3 days before, they went to a farm about 20 kilometers away, I think, in the hills. And they found out, I didn't know this, that for this festival, tomato growers produce these special tomatoes which are extra big, extra plump, and much better for throwing at each other. So they got this great backstory of finding out more about the tomatoes. It's a good narrative. The unexpected voice. We're all travelers. My role as a travel researcher, as an analyst, I work with brands around the world who want to know what's happening in travel and tourism, lifestyle, culture, everything here in Asia. I talk to people all the time. I particularly talk to my drivers. I take Grab taxis all the time. 3 weeks ago, I arrived late at night, about 1 in the morning, in Phoenix, Arizona, in the US. I was going to a travel conference, never been to the city before. I was about the last person out of the airport. I couldn't get an Uber. Kept clicking. Eventually, I got one. This guy turns up, smiling, happy. It's 1:30 in the morning. I'm jet lagged. I just want to get to my hotel. I know the drive is about 45 minutes. So I start talking to the guy. One of the most fascinating conversations I ever had. This guy was born in Afghanistan, lived in Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and lived for 7 years in Moscow. He speaks a gazillion languages. He's Russian. I asked him to speak Russian, totally fluent. Moved to the US about 8 years ago. We had just a conversation about everything. But he told me a lot about Phoenix, Arizona, about the US. He is an inveterate traveler himself. He told me his stories, his family stories, everything. I learned so much in 40 minutes. The next day, I messaged him. I said, thank you very much for the journey. Thanks for the chat. I'm sorry if I asked you too many questions. And he just replied back. He said, don't apologize. If we don't ask questions, we don't learn. And that, I think, is a key message for travel and tourism. If we don't ask questions, if we're not prepared to learn, then what is the point of traveling? But travelers in this region are really willing to learn. They are really willing to experience, to explore, and to experiment. And we have to find new ways to narrate those experiences. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Mr. Gary Bowerman, the Director of Check-in Asia. Well, next up, let me introduce to you our next speaker. He is the State Minister of the Ministry of Tourism of the Maldives, Dr. Ahmed Saleh. Now, Dr. Saleh is the Minister of State for Tourism and joined the Maldives Tourism Administration in 1985. He has represented the government of Maldives in various national and international forums related to tourism, and he specializes in human resources in the tourism industry, tourism policy formulation, tourism planning and development, sustainable tourism development, and socio-economic impacts of tourism. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Ahmed Saleh.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Are you awake or sleeping? Did Gary make you sleep or did he wake you up? Okay, the Maldives. How many of you have been to Maldives? Quite a few. Thank you. How many of you know where it is? Where? Where? There. This doesn't work. This doesn't work later. It works. Can't see it. Okay. We are in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's an archipelagic island state consisting of almost 1,000 islands. Out of them, 171 has been developed as resorts. What's a resort? For us, it's different. For you, it might be something different. A resort for me is one island, one resort concept. Meaning, on this particular island, there will be only a resort, a hotel for you. There will be no locals on these islands. So it's your paradise. It's your private retreat. You come and enjoy it. What we are selling is a dream. What we are selling, as Gary mentioned, is an experience. What we want you to do when you go back home is relax, enjoyment, and carry a dream. That's what we are selling. And 189 inhabited, very small population, less than almost 500,000 people. But we do a lot of noise. 1972, what happened? This is when tourism was introduced in the Maldives. 1972. We are very small, very humble beginning. no airports, no infrastructure, no communication, no software, no hardware. We took a risk. We took a gamble. There was only 2 resorts in 1972, only 280 beds, only 1,000 people came. So this is a typical room, guest room at that time in 1972. Come this year, what happened? What have we achieved? We are celebrating 50 years of tourism in the Maldives this year. 50 years, Golden Jubilee. Thank you. But what did we learn? What did we do right? What did we do wrong? World leading destination. World Travel Awards 2020, 2021, and 2022. This is how we evolved over the last 50 years in terms of bed capacity. Steady growth. But still, it's only 60,000 beds. Very small. These beds are divided into these properties: guest houses, resorts, hotels, liveaboards. Resorts is the main chunk of the beds. Arrivals, steady growth again, except few hiccups here and there. 2005, 2008, and then COVID. Okay, what did COVID-19 did to us? What was the impact? Small island nation lying nowhere, away from the rest of the world. It takes, how much you pay for a flight from KL to Maldives? How much? Anyone? Very expensive. Why? Because we are away from the normal routine. So they got a special diversion to go from Asia into the Indian Ocean. Costly. So what did happen? So when COVID-19 came, we declared emergency on March 12th. Remember this day, March 12th. Loss of arrivals of almost 500,000. Revenue fall by 23.4%. Arrival lost, lowest in 15 years. In 15, almost 1.5 decades, we have fell back. Just one incident across the globe. This is how fickle tourism industry is. Very sensitive to shocks. You can do the magic like we did in tourism product-wise, but you can only control your internal setup. You cannot control external influences of tourism. That's beyond you. This is what it did to us. Let's go back to the graph again. Growing very well. 2005, tsunami hit us. It declined arrivals by 35%. 3 waves of 1 meter hit us. Only 20 resorts were shut. The rest were untouched. See what happened? Again, communication. The message was, Maldives, tsunami, scary, don't travel. That's how powerful communication is. We didn't suffer all the islands. Only 20 suffered. But the message was, Maldives hit by tsunami, it's all the storm submerged, no, don't go there, it's not safe. That's what happened to us. Then came the global crisis, 44% decline. But again, the main point is, I mentioned before, tourism is a fickle industry. But look at how it rebounds back. It's our topic in this session. Next year, 2006, we bounce back again. Almost same level as the year before. This is how resilient tourism is. How people want to travel. People want to travel. That's the need. They want, look, I want to take my annual break. I want to go for my holiday. And then you look at 2008, financial crisis, again we bounce back again, stronger than the previous year. And look at tsunami and the pandemic. That hit much harder. We couldn't bounce back yet. We are on the way. We are going up, but still not yet. Hopefully, by the end of this year, we'll reach our 19 figures. But how did we achieve that? That's the question. We remember in this session, in the agenda, it says that tourism is a cross-sectoral industry. It's linked with transport, real estate, lifestyle, everything else. Look what happened to us. 2019, we are doing okay. If you look at the types of industries, all of them fell because of the impact of COVID. All of them. Real estate, tourism, fisheries, construction, public admin, transport, community, all of them are minus. This is how much we depend on tourism. This is a problem for us. Tourism, we say, is a savior for small island states. But it's what happened to us. Because we heavily depend on tourism. It's our backbone of the economy. 21, we are bounced back again. As I mentioned, we are very, very resilient. So what did we do? On 7th March, our first positive case was reported. On 12th March, we declared emergency. Then, the normal stuff we all have gone through in all the governments, we did the same sort of steps. I won't go through that. And this our president getting vaccination. He was one of the first to get vaccinated. This was done because getting people to believe in the vaccination. There was a lot of talks. It's bad, it's wrong, don't do it, don't have vaccines. But he was the first one who did that, who got vaccinated. Then also, the other thing, main thing I want to tell you is that we had regular daily communication, both internally and externally. We kept people informed, how many people are positive, how many people are recovered, and blah, blah. Daily. Then from the tourism side, what we did was we brought in all the stakeholders, we made a steering committee, and then we discussed and then we take action based on that discussions. And then also we established a SMU in the tourism ministry. Then we have a SOPs, you all did that. Then the most tough thing, the difficulty we faced was we don't have hospitals like you guys have in your big countries. We don't have the medical supplies. We don't have the people. We don't have the nurses, the doctors. We don't have even the hospitals. What we did was we closed some resorts and asked them to work, asked them for their permission to use them as centers for isolation. So if you are a tourist who came to Maldives and you become positive, you will be staying in a resort, not in a hospital. If you're a positive case, you arrive in the Maldives, and yet you need to be isolated, we put you in a resort. And those people, as Gary was mentioning, they were streaming, they were showing their stay in the Maldives, being COVID positive. And those messages, those videos were played repeatedly again and again and again. The family, the loved ones, their friends. So the other thing you're looking at is how did we do marketing promotion? What did we do? Before COVID, we had an initial marketing plan to look at experiential, what Gary mentioned, experiential tourism. We want to focus on that, sort of our plan was. But with the COVID, we changed. We look at react, rethink, and recover. It's our main marketing philosophy at that time. So during the first phase of COVID, we moved from offline channels to digital channels. And then we followed UNWTO guide. We work very closely with UNWTO. We followed their guideline, and then we worked with them, and we said that the main message was staying home today and travel tomorrow. And then the second phase, the third phase, we went through that. Then the main thing was, how can we get the tourists back? What message should we give to them? How can we convince somebody living in UK, look, you should come to Maldives? Remember the decision-making process. As a tourist, what do you go through? We're talking about COVID-19. At home and sitting in your room with your family and loved ones, when your son says, look, Dad, I want to go holiday to Maldives. Say, look, are you crazy? It's COVID. So what can we do in the Maldives to convince that father, that dad, to come to Maldives? How can we convince them? So that's what we did. We kept them informed of the steps we've taken, what were the measures, what do they have to go through various platforms. The primary objective was to make people believe it is safe to come to Maldives. That's the main thing. That's what people are looking for. They won't ensure that when they go to Maldives, they'll be safe and come back home without having to be locked down again. Okay. To do that, we did a lot of campaigns. I won't go through all of them. The main thing I want to say, our president was at WTM London, 2021. With the travel trade, with our partners, with our stakeholders, to give that message across. He was there personally. So these are the various things we did in terms of digital media. Okay. We opened. Remember I said, remember a date? It was 12th of March. March, April, May, June, July. 5 months we opened. Huge risk. I personally said, no, we should not open. I couldn't believe that we are ready for that. But we did that. Okay, 19 figures, or 20 figures, look at the decline. '21, we bounced back in August. We again went up in October, November. '22, we almost above all 19 figures. But it's not achieved because of our work, because the industry believed in us that we can do it. Our partners, a lot of people sacrificed their lives for this. Mainly people working in the resorts, the locals, the communities, the expatriates, tour operators, travel agents, travel writers, the media. They all played a key role in our recovery, not only us. And we thank them for that. Key factors. Okay, being isolated, being segregated, being in island states, we can lock one island, keep the other open. So each island is an entity itself. So even if Kanduma had the COVID cases, I can keep Bandos open. So being island states, we're able to do that. So that's one key factor for this. Again, one resort concept. Interventions in timely manner is very, very crucial. You can't delay, you can't be ahead. It's very important to evaluate, analyze, to research, and then do actions necessarily. Communication, I can't stress enough. Strong public and private partnership, crucial. Remember we talked about yesterday about financial support. What would happen if we close a resort? The locals are unemployed, they lose their livelihood, they will suffer. Government intervened in providing pay to them, in providing loan schemes to smaller SMEs, in also delaying the lease rent of these islands, deferring the land rent, the tax payments they have to the government, due to the government. So financial interventions, incentives are crucial at times of crisis. We can't do as much as Australia did, for example. We can't pay that much. Not so rich like Australia, but what I'm saying is that whatever you could do, you could hold their hands because the future is coming. Then also people are very loyal to our brand. What is the brand? There are people who come, 35% of the arrivals are repeaters. Way forward, we can't forget COVID. It will be coming in various forms, maybe not COVID, maybe something else. We have to learn the lessons. We've got to use those we have learned, and then apply in our policies, apply in strategic planning, and keep them always in our mind. Then these are things we have already heard. There's nothing new in this. So thank you so much for your kind attention.
Dr. Ahmed, we might have a question or two right here. Yeah, if you don't mind. Let's pick this one from Slido. This one just came in. Okay. Doctor, here's the question. We have seen the traveler needs have slightly changed since the pandemic. What do you believe the needs are to maintain, or what needs to be added to the value of Maldives as a destination?
As we heard before, the tourists are changing. It's very true. I thank you for the question. It's a very relevant question for us as well. People are changing. I can't answer it standing in here. I could research, I could ask them, I could question them, and then only I can give an answer for that. But from what we have seen for the last few months, number one, safety and security is number one. It has always been. Number two is they are making decisions much more quickly, much more in short term. They don't make 6 months advance bookings now. They make 1 month or 30 days. The bookings are done. So I need to have proper research done and ask them. Again, as Gary mentioned, tourists are not one, but you can't judge them as one people. We got to look at every market, every target market separately. We got to analyze them and evaluate them and ask them. But the most important thing is they are looking for, what we have seen is, they are looking for experience. We offer them a dream come true, as we say, but I think they need more than that. They need to learn the way of life of the people they're visiting. They want to have interaction with the public, with the community as well. We have seen that. Because we opened guest house tourism in the Maldives recently, and people are more willing to go to those islands and interact with the people, sit with the locals, eat with the locals, and talk and chit-chat. People are changing. They want to have more, they want to enrich themselves by the end of the holiday. So we got to do more work to answer the question. We got to do more studies, research, and then based on that, we can come up with a formula for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give a big hand to Dr. Ahmed Saleh, State Minister of the Ministry of Tourism of the Maldives.
And next up, we have Mr. Brent Anderson, Regional General Manager of Tourism Australia. A little bit about Mr. Anderson. He is Tourism Australia's Regional General Manager, South and Southeast Asia, SSEA. Brent has over 20 years of experience promoting Australia to international visitors, with a key focus on developing partnerships with tourism and non-tourism global organizations. He has led numerous high-impact campaigns, including Undiscover Australia, the first holistic SSEA campaign that brought together over 40 regional partners and challenged perceptions and stereotypes of Australia's destination offering. Motivated by their dynamic industry environment as well as the SSEA region's culturally diverse consumers and fast-growing potential, Brent is stationed in Singapore and has lived and traveled in Asia for over 15 years. Mr. Brent Anderson, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. G'day. I would like to start by something that you'll see more and more often from Australian government and private enterprise, but by acknowledging I'm about to talk about Australia, so it's only appropriate that I acknowledge our traditional owners of Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and in acknowledging them, also talk about their connection to sea, land, and culture and country. Thank you very much. We've heard a lot about stories, we've heard a lot about the Maldives. The reference to Kanduma was I was supporting you in September, Dr. Sali. I actually read the COVID response plan, so I have to admit, once I landed at Kanduma, I was actually hoping there was a case. To be stuck in Kanduma for a couple of weeks would pretty much be the best way to finish off COVID for me. This is us a year ago. So Australia has only been open a year, and that first cohort was Singapore citizens. We're seeing a slow and gradual recovery, and it's quite amazing to think that Australia, we had a much stricter COVID control policy. We only opened to the rest of the world in March this year. So the last 8 to 9 months have been quite fulfilling in terms of how quickly we've seen that recovery, but there's still a long way to go. To put it in context, I won't put up charts and slides, but the Australian tourism industry pre-COVID was worth $166 billion to the Australian economy. About 46 billion of that came from international tourism, and we had one of the hardest border closures, not only for international tourists, but even within our states we closed down borders as well. So it decimated our industry, and I think Dr. Sali brought it to life where that's a lot of jobs, a lot of people who were out of work, and you know, we're still struggling with that supply side issue of getting staff back like every destination in the world. In March 2022, we opened our borders, and at the same time, we brought out this long-term tourism strategy called Thrive 2030. The key things about Thrive 2030 is 3 key pillars: diversifying, not only our markets and our experiences, but also the destinations that we offer. You'll see a lot more inclusion of our First Nations, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures as well, and they underpin the strategy as well, and it's such a unique selling point for Australia. It was also about modernisation, you know, the visitor economy workforce and business practices, how we work, but also in terms of staff, creating a long-term viable career path in tourism for our up-and-coming generations. And the third theme was about collaboration. Tourism thrives on collaboration. You know, Gary's pointed out all the different industries that come to play in our industry. And by working with government and private enterprise and really facilitating those collaborations, we believe we can grow the tourism economy to be worth more than 230 billion by 2030. Our role at Tourism Australia is we're destination marketers, a national tourism organisation. You know, our focus is based upon these 10 key principles of destination marketing. I'm going to go into a few of them today, but you can go to our corporate site. There's a lot of information about how we do this and how we work. Okay. The number one thing is win in consideration. And before COVID, and it's true now during COVID, when looking at their next international trip, all travellers are considering, on average, about 3 destinations of where they're going to go next. Some markets are a little bit higher at 6, like India, where they've got so much choice, but in general, it's about an average of 3 destinations in their bucket list for their next trip. This is our job. As Tourism Australia, we have to win in consideration. And we have to win in consideration with our target audience. So the graph you can see there, the little green indicators indicate that for our high-yield traveller target audience, there's a significant difference in perception and winning in consideration compared to the general population that we target around the world. The second principle, competitive experiences. we really need to show not only those experiences that we understand consumers are looking for. So there's a project we do called the Consumer Demand Project, which talks about what are those rational, so safety and security, but what are those other motivating experiences that we need to work at. And you need to be good in safety and security. You know, Dr. Sali's presentation talked about that. The perception of the consumer of you being a safe destination for a holiday is key. But it's not just about those perceptions that you own in terms of motivators that you're known for. So Australia is known for its natural wonders and its beaches. It's what are those experiences that surprise consumers, that surprise your target audience, that you over-index on and can be used as motivators to generate word of mouth and positive reaction. One of the drivers, and Gary's touched on it very closely, is food in this part of the world. It's amazing how much of a motivator food and drink is for the South and Southeast Asian audiences. And it's also very encouraging for us that once people go there, Australian, if I ask anyone, could you define Australian cuisine? Probably the only Australians in the room would go, maybe a meat pie. It's not, but it's actually a factor that so surprises a lot of our visitors, and post-visitation really ranks and significantly outranks their pre-visitation experience. Those are the things and the stories that we will continue to drive and tell. And I think Gary really highlighted it. It's not just about the food itself. It's about the people who produce it, the people who cook with it, the place you get to eat it, like the unique setting we saw for Vietnam. We've got some pretty unique places. And the produce itself, just how much care and passion goes into growing the perfect tomato for throwing. We do it for eating, etc. An increasingly important pillar of our story that we tell is our Indigenous communities, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. You're seeing a lot of communities throughout Australia. This is the world's longest surviving culture, 65,000 plus years of a continuous culture. And I will say this as someone who grew up in Australia, I'm only starting to learn about it now. We're seeing Indigenous culture, living practices and people really infiltrating the way of life in Australia, and we're relearning a whole lot of things that we were too ignorant to listen to for the last 200 years. I'm giving you some examples on the screen here. You can go and do a walk about cultural adventure. Looking at that, it's walking through a mangrove, but you go mangrove, mud crabbing, you go and spearfish, etc. You sit down, you get a real sense of the spiritual and connection to place and country with the guides. But we're also seeing mainstream businesses, like the bottom middle photo, bridge climb, a really famous, iconic experience in Sydney. But they're actually doing that in partnership with the local Aboriginal community to tell the story of what Sydney was like before European settlement and get a sense of that place and country from these individuals as well. Then you're seeing more mainstream things. The Mabu Mabu Big Esso is a restaurant in Melbourne run by an Indigenous chef who uses Indigenous sourced ingredients. So new foods that are coming on and starting to develop export markets as well. I think 10 years ago, no one outside of Australia knew about finger limes, and suddenly they were on supermarket shelves throughout Southeast Asia as a unique fruit. Our Indigenous story is also the cornerstone of our sustainability story. This is a culture that lived by the ethos, look after the land and it'll look after you for 65,000 plus years. And that's not only in the tourism industry, you're seeing this sustainability message come through. You're seeing it in a number of other industries throughout Australia as well. I'm really happy to say of our 9 million international visitors in 2019, 1.4 million of those undertook some form of Aboriginal experience, which was a growth year on year of 6%, and will only accelerate as we come out of the pandemic. This is a living culture, so travellers can experience it almost anywhere in Australia, and it's really a key competitive advantage for us and unique selling proposition. I've already touched on a bit about sustainable tourism, and the Australian tourism industry is fundamentally underpinned by sustainability. We have unique places in the world that are left alone just because they're beautiful, and we, through tourism, can derive an economic benefit from them. The examples on the screen, the conservation connection is on Kangaroo Island, where you can take advantage of an ongoing research project and actually contribute to that research project of documenting the number of different species you see, but directly through your tourism activity, contributing to the sustainable development and protection of that area. Reef HQ, the one on the top right corner, a totally solar and wind-powered pontoon, totally 100% recyclable and sustainable. Not only can you actually go and dive and sleep and live aboard this pontoon on the Great Barrier Reef, you can also go and plant your own bit of coral and come back in 10 years' time and see how you've helped preserve the Great Barrier Reef, one of the world's 7 great wonders. The heart of sustainability, our role as an NTO is to tell stories, and the sustainable story is actually pretty good. We get champions. We don't have a rating system, a credibility system. What we do is we pick the heroes that lead these stories, and we tell their stories everywhere from environmental sustainability to cultural sustainability. There's fantastic stories, and it is actually our absolute duty as Tourism Australia to go and get these stories. My favourite one is a mate of mine, Charles Carlo, bottom right of your screen. Charles bought a 60,000 hectare sheep farm in the middle of South Australia. Pretty big bit of land, Dr. Sali. He took sheep off it, half of it, when he first bought it, and he thought tourists will love this. And you can actually do a trek through his property, and you turn up, and there, out in the open, is a bed with Egyptian cotton linen. Your chef's been there preparing your meal. He's already chilled the champagne if that's your poison, etc. And then he leaves you after that, and you sleep under the stars. The next morning he comes and wakes you up, makes your breakfast, and then you walk to the next camp. Charles, as part of taking those sheep off the property, and they're an introduced animal, he also eradicated a lot of feral animals. Now, 10 years plus later, he's got no sheep on the property. He's also seeing a massive resurgence in native species and really rare species as well come through. And every guest that stays, Charlie donates $10 to the Australian Conservation Foundation for their regeneration projects throughout. And it's a beautiful story to tell. Charles is the only story I've been able to get into the Singapore Airlines PPS Club dinner. So another part of our story. Being creatively ambitious. We saw Lizzie previously in Gary's presentation, etc. Last month, a month ago, I was bouncing around the region launching Come and Say Good Day. And as a campaign, it's very much true to what we are and how we're perceived as Australian, and it's a genuine warm welcome. We're not trying to be sophisticated, we just want to show you in this post-COVID world, Australia's still there, our beautiful natural environment's there, and you'll be genuinely welcome to our destination as well. The film features a cartoon, a souvenir toy kangaroo created by CGI, and that was very deliberate. We want to really go into those principles, use your icons, instant connection about Australia. It also gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of where we can use Ruby as she bounces around the world. The creative concept comes from one that we did in the 80s back in the US. The guy on the left, for those of you who don't know, is Paul Hogan, a very famous Australian comedian and actor. And just using those talents and that genuine Aussie warm welcome in a different way. So Ruby is actually voiced by an Australian actress, Rose Byrne, and Louis is her guest, a unicorn by Canadian actor Will Arnett. And we're developing this campaign to just showcase not only those icons that you see, the Harbour Bridge, the Opera House, Uluru, etc., but also introduce new things like going oyster shucking in Tasmania. Another principle is always be distinctive. Through this campaign, it's been built to instantly be recognised. I've talked about the use of icons, and we did a lot of research during COVID, like everyone else, but the real thing that came through is as soon as we introduce a kangaroo, everyone knows we're talking about Australia. Some Australians who, we have opinions about our marketing, get very much, are we still using kangaroos? But it's the one thing that gets the consumer's attention straight away and understanding that they're talking about Australia. And it comes down to that competitive edge. Every destination in the world has so much to offer. Japan, we were talking this morning, is my #1 competitor from this part of the world, and I love Japan. I spent quite a bit of money in the Maldives and a lot of time there as well. But our Indigenous culture is such an important story and such a unique thing to Australia. Over 300 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations existed in Australia at the time of settlement. And seeing that culture come through and being enhanced and that story being told throughout, it gives us a really strong competitive advantage as we emerge. I'm going to leave it there. It's a genuine welcome. I will give a plug to our website if you want to see the research I've talked about, the Consumer Demand Project. We just launched the Future of Demand Project last week as well, which really talks about what are consumers in each individual market looking for. But I thank you very much for your time today.
If you could remain on stage, we have a question for you, Mr. Anderson. So you mentioned Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture was driving development and awareness of Australia's First Nations. Are there other industries that are also starting to engage and learn from this 65,000-year-old culture?
It's quite amazing how, to be honest, we're waking up to what was sitting there for us. Agriculture is a really big one, land management. Australia has a very fragile ecology. So a number of those practices, and you're seeing farmers working directly with Aboriginal elders who know the land. We talk about natural disasters and their impact on perception. During the bushfires in Australia, there was coverage around the world was just big walls of flame. But if you actually look at lands that have been turned over to traditional land management practices, the fires hardly touched them. So we're learning as we go and relearning. And thankfully our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are there willing to share it with us. And that respect to country and respect for each other comes from that.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Let's give it up for Mr. Brett Anderson, everyone. All right, Melissa, we'll go ahead to introduce our next speaker, yeah? Mr. Ben Owen, the project manager, Center Stage project of UNWTO. Ben is a project manager working in UNWTO's Ethics, Culture and Social Responsibility Department, having previously coordinated the Global Report on Women in Tourism, second edition. Ben spearheaded the development of the Center Stage project and is responsible for gender equality initiatives within UNWTO. Ben has extensive experience working on equality projects and initiatives affecting a wide range of disadvantaged groups. Before joining UNWTO, Ben worked at the European Parliament on the Transport and Tourism Committee and the Women's Rights and Gender Equality Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ben Owen.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. I know I'm the last one on. I'm the last of the blue suits for this morning. So just before our coffee break, to wake us all up a bit, I'm going to ask you a few questions. So we're all from the tourism sector here today, correct? Is that correct? Great. So if I could just ask us to do something. Can I ask all the women in the room to please stand up? If we could all stand up. Very nice. Everybody's looking lovely this morning. Now just have a little look around, everybody. Have a little look around. Thank you very much. If you may sit down again, ladies, thank you. And now, men, it's your turn. Please, all the men, stand up. There we go. Everyone's looking a little bit more alive. We could just have a look around, everybody. Have a look at the room. This will play into something that comes into one of my slides very shortly. So you can sit down again now. That was just to wake you up, really. Good morning. My name is Ben Owen. I'm from the World Tourism Organization. I'm here on behalf of the head of my department, Marina Diotelevi, who sends her apology. She's not able to be with us today. So what I'll be talking about today is the inspiring story of hundreds of women and some men across the world who have been working on the Center Stage project over the past 2 years. So taking you back now to 2020, UNWTO had a vision as the tourism sector was going up in flames. I'm not quite sure how to put it, but things were dire, as we all know. At that time, we had a vision in our department, in the ethics department, to put women's empowerment center stage of the tourism recovery efforts. And today I'm going to talk you through, first of all, why that was our vision at such a time to be focusing on such an issue, how we implemented this vision throughout with the model that we've created for change, and then what the results have been. So first of all, why? So as you will have seen in the room today, we're all from the tourism sector. It's quite a representative audience I can see that we've got today. Tourism is a sector that has a majority of the workforce that is female. Our research before the pandemic showed that 54% of the tourism workforce was female. We've seen today lots of women with us, and it's very representative of what the sector is. However, it sounds good on paper for gender equality, right, and women's empowerment. However, once you start looking, as you go up the levels within the tourism sector, you can see why this was a priority of ours and still is as UNWTO. Only 40% of, once you get to management level in hospitality, only 40% of those roles are filled by women. At the ministerial level in the public sector, 23% in 2019 were women. That means 75% of those roles were held by men. And once we get up to the higher echelons, only 8%, I think, yes, correct? 8% of board positions in the hospitality sector were filled by women in 2019. So this is why UNWTO, at a time of crisis for the sector, had a vision to ensure that the sector continued to put women's empowerment center stage of our policy making. Because we knew that women, as Antonio Guterres said, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the pandemic had a woman's face. It did not affect us all equally, and in tourism that was true as well. Because women were concentrated in lower skilled, lower paid and more precarious employment, the impacts of the pandemic were felt hardest by them first. So now we'll move on to how UNWTO went about implementing this vision that we had. So our research also showed, who here is from the public sector? Do we have any representatives from government, local authorities? One or two hands. And some more at the back. Don't be shy. Do put your hands up. Very good. And the private sector. Business representatives, who works for a business, owns your own business here today? Lovely, thank you. And are there any representatives of NGOs or associations? Great. So we've got representation from all three of these groups that we see on the stage. Now, our research at UNWTO has proved that to effect change for gender equality, to offer more opportunities for women's empowerment, then these three different parts of our sector need to work together. And the results are better when we work together than when we work alone. So the Center Stage project took this research, and we took in each of the countries where we piloted this project over the past 2 years. The government worked with us, as well as 10 tourism businesses and 4 NGOs, associations, women's associations or universities, to work together to implement this vision that I've just talked about. Now, the project, we're going to take you over to the other side of the world. The project was piloted in just 4 countries. This was Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Jordan, and Mexico. So all the results of what we've seen today was piloted here. But please, on behalf of UNWTO, let me assure you, we have a commitment to work on gender equality and women's empowerment with all of our member states. And we're looking to scale up this project to all world regions, of course, including here in Asia and the Pacific. So first of all, what we had to do was we had to go out and prove that what we knew to be true was actually true. We needed to find the benchmark of what the situation actually was, what had happened during the pandemic. We knew that the impact was going to be greater on women, but we didn't have the data to back that up. This is a problem when you work on women's empowerment and gender equality in general. Data on women's employment across the world is very scarce. And in tourism, the picture is even more bleak. There are very few countries reporting this data. So at the beginning of the project, we did a survey in the 4 countries to find out exactly what had the impact, the gendered impact, been of the pandemic on employment. So here, some of the inspiring women that we work with, by the way, from some of these countries, Karen and Elizabeth here. Here are the results of the survey, and it found exactly what we thought it was going to. COVID-19 affected women's employment in a greater way than men. In all 4 of the countries that we surveyed, women were more likely to lose their job because of the pandemic. Women were more likely to have their salaries reduced because of the pandemic, more likely to be put on less working hours, more likely to have to look after, spend more time looking after their dependents, on their children and older people, more likely to have to pay to have somebody to care for those dependents' children, and less likely to have any free time during the pandemic. This was proved by our survey across all of the 4 countries, and since then, data has been coming in which backs this up across the world. So this was the beginning of the project. We then had this data. We knew what we were looking at. We knew how many people had lost their jobs. We knew how many different men and women. And then where do we go from here? So with the participating organizations, like I said, we created a model for change within the tourism sector, one that you can all buy into. We'll get to that towards the end of the presentation, that brings the public sector, the private sector, and the civil society together. So we worked with governments to create personalized action plans, 1-year action plans that would put women's empowerment at the center of their recovery plans in these 4 countries. Now we're going to watch a short video about Jordan, and if we could play the video now, please, and some of what they were doing in Jordan, the Ministry of Tourism there.
السياحة لديها إمكانات كبيرة للمساهمة في المساواة بين الرجل والمرأة. سنتر ستيج هو مشروع منظمة السياحة العالمية، وستقوم منظمة السياحة العالمية ووزارة السياحة والآثار الأردنية بالإضافة إلى 10 شركات لتنفيذ خطة عمل مدتها عام واحد. سيعمل المشروع على تحسين ظروف عمل السيدات ودعم التقدم الوظيفي للمرأة في السياحة وتشجيع صنع السياسات التي تراعي الفوارق بين الجنسين في هذا القطاع.
كمدربة ساعدني مشروع سنتر ستيج في فهم القضايا المتعلقة بالمساواة بين الرجل والمرأة.
بالنسبة لدور المرأة عم نشوف دور بارز للمرأة بقطاع السياحة في صناعة القرار. على سبيل المثال أنا و5 سيدات موجودين بلجنة تطوير السياحة في الديوان الملكي.
Thank you very much. So going back to, this is what the government was doing in Jordan and across the other 4 countries. We had a personalized action plan for each of the national tourism administrations. But we also had 10 businesses in each of the countries, as I've mentioned, 10 leading businesses for gender equality in each of the countries. Each of these businesses implemented the same action plan. This is an action plan that's available for any of you who are interested. That's available on the UNWTO website, on the Center Stage website, that had 10 concrete actions that would allow these businesses to be more gender responsive, what we call it. So offering more opportunities, more equal opportunities for the men and women to enter and to progress within their tourism businesses. This private sector action plan included actions such as procurement, so increasing procurement from women-led businesses and gender-responsive businesses. Visibility, producing a series of videos is what we did, but making the issue visible, talking about it, and we'll see a little bit why in a moment. Measures to prevent sexual harassment within businesses, adequate maternity cover, provide training, provide measures and systems for adequate career progression of women, and of course data that I've already discussed too, which is essential for bringing about change. And what have been the results? We're getting closer to coffee, everybody, don't worry. But first of all, we are going to find out what the results of all this work was. So first of all, the project, the model that we've created, that has 3 main work pillars. The first is political commitment. Your Excellency, Dr. Ahmed, without yourself, without the other ministers here today, change is not possible. We know this. So we've worked tirelessly throughout the past 2 years to put women's empowerment on the top tables of tourism, policy making and decision making across the world. The G20 tourism ministers meeting in Indonesia recently, Ika, nice to see you here today. Women's empowerment was the 3rd of 5 main pillars of the guidelines that were produced from that, and Center Stage project was included as an example of best practice. At our regional commission meetings across the world, here you can see the Middle East regional commission meeting of the UNWTO, the project has been presented, and we've been making sure that we keep that spotlight on this despite all of the other work that's going on in the tourism restart. Second of all is our knowledge product. So we've created some guidelines, also all available to you all on gender mainstreaming. These are available online for free, UNWTO website. How to make your business, how to make your public tourism institution more gender responsive and ensure that a gender perspective, as we say, is integrated throughout the policymaking process. We also have an online course, atingi.org. It only takes 1 hour to complete, and it's designed for all levels, an introductory course on why gender equality is important, why that will make your business not only more profitable, but will make those profits more sustainable in the future, which is exactly what our research has shown. The project also provided direct capacity building and training. We have a bunch of online workshops which are available for you to watch. We also went to the countries and did very much like this, direct in-person training with women who had been infected by the pandemic on skills that they might need to adapt their businesses to a post-COVID world, etc. Finally, an awareness-raising campaign. So one of the videos that you've just seen, we've created a host of those. This is, again, about that political commitment. It's about making sure that, as we are today, people are talking about this. People are still working on this because the pandemic did have a woman's face, and we all, together, have a responsibility to making sure that we change that for the future. So finally, just to talk what some of the main results were about from the project, the implementation of the International Labour Organization's Conventions 183 on maternity cover and 190 on sexual harassment and violence. Now, these are conventions that have not been ratified by that many countries, and at the beginning of the project, the countries are still in the process of ratifying this. However, what we've done with this model with Centre Stage is we've been able to work directly with the private sector to uptake the implementation of the measures within these conventions while the countries are still ratifying them. Actually, on the ground, the measures are already being implemented. We've also created a network of gender-responsive agents for change within the countries, so businesses and governments who are leaders for gender-sensitive policy making and businesses, the concrete knowledge projects I just talked about, and the data that we've produced on women in tourism. So where do we go from here? The Centre Stage project in these 4 pilot countries is coming to a close. We're waiting now just for the final results. And as I've said, we believe, and we can see from the results, that we have, I will just give you some other results that haven't been on the screen actually. For example, in Costa Rica, the 10 businesses that we're working with were all SMEs. And within those 10 small businesses, 150 women have received a promotion over the past year through the career progression schemes that we were talking about. In the Dominican Republic, the Ministry of Tourism produced data on women in tourism for the first time, literally going to the central bank, asking for the data, analyzing it themselves, and from that, then they are able to produce more gender-sensitive policies. In Jordan, over 400 people have so far received gender equality sensitivity training. What is gender equality? Exactly what I was talking about. And we've trained people within the country that will take that forward. Also, the businesses that we work with in Jordan, they saw a 10% increase in employment over the year that we were working with them, but a 21% increase in female employment. Now, in Jordan, that is one of the countries with the lowest levels of women's employment in tourism. That means a lot. And so these are some of the things many more results, that have shown us that the model that we have created is a participatory model for change that involves the collaboration between the private sector, the public sector, and civil society, and of course, the international organizations. As UNWTO, we are committed to the Sustainable Development Agenda of the United Nations, in particular, Sustainable Development Goal 5. Now, I'd just like to end the presentation. For those of you that aren't aware of the SDGs and Sustainable Development Goal, number 5 is gender equality. So this is the commitment at a global level by all of the countries of the United Nations to make gender equality a reality and empower all women and girls. Now, the tourism sector, for a long time, has been a vehicle for this, for gender equality, for women's empowerment. However, as the numbers I've already shown you and the effect of the pandemic has shown, this is still not a reality. With the tools that we've got put in place with the Centre Stage project that are available to you all, we can all play our small part in making SDG 5 a reality, and I very much encourage you to go and have a look at what those resources are and take this work forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben Owen. Could you remain on stage for 1 minute for a question?
Sure.
So, Ben, do you have any questions for Ben? I've been dying to do that all morning. So, Ben, do you have any questions for him?
Well, this Ben has a question for that Ben over there. What can we as in the people in this room, industry players and decision makers, do for gender equality? A very general question.
Thank you, Ben. I've been dying to say that all morning too. Well, as I've been mentioning, many of the resources that we've created under this Centre Stage project are all available online for free on the UNWTO website. In particular, for those of you who are from a business, any business owners, I would really recommend that you check out the action plan of the Centre Stage project. This was designed at a time when tourism businesses were not making any money. We knew that this was not, from a business perspective, this was perhaps not up there in the priorities. So it's been designed as an action plan that is realistic to be implemented. It's to be implemented over 1 year, and that's available for you. And we really would recommend that as a starting point to be able to offer more opportunities to women to enter and to progress within your tourism companies, as well as the other products that I mentioned, the other resources. They're all available on the UNWTO website. So I'd say head there. Is that all right?
Well, thank you, Ben.
Thank you,
much.
Ben.
Let's give that Ben a warm round of applause. Ben Owen, everyone. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I guess we'll go ahead and do a little coffee break. The time now is 11:25 sharp. Let's be back here at 11:40, please. We shall continue with 4 wonderful speakers, and we can't wait to have you back here in the hall. Thank you so much. Enjoy your coffee break. We'll see you at 11:40.
All right, we continue with session 3, ladies and gentlemen, and we have 4 speakers joining us today who will be sharing their stories of success and resilience. I'm starting off with Mr. Albert, co-founder of Traveloka, lifestyle super app powered by FinTech. Albert is one of the co-founders and the Chief External Relations Officer of Traveloka. As the Chief External Relations Officer, he is responsible for ensuring that Traveloka establishes and maintains strong relationships with external stakeholders, including but not limited to the governments and partners across the region. Albert co-founded Traveloka with the aim to make flight booking easier for people. Under his leadership, Traveloka has gained the trust of consumers with over 100 million app downloads. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Albert.
Hi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat pagi. Good morning, I guess it's still a good morning, or maybe selamat siang. I'm Albert, co-founder of Traveloka. I would like to thank MOTAC for inviting me to this conference, and also the organizers and team for the hard work for making this happen. Such a great honor to be here to deliver Traveloka story for this important event in this beautiful city of Kota Kinabalu. Before we start, I would like to show you a short video of Traveloka.
Everything in life. Like the first time you convinced him this was a good idea. Not knowing his fear of heights. But it all turned out well. Remember that first paycheck you received? And you just couldn't wait to book a nice staycation for mom and dad. Oh, what about the first time you went to Japan and took that first step to forever? No matter how many memorable first times you've had, we're always here to give you more. Traveloka.
I hope that that video provides you a brief introduction to Traveloka. 10 years ago, we began our humble journey starting in Indonesia, developing travel and meta search engine to simplify travel from Indonesia to the world. As a tech company with data-driven culture, we build diverse and collaborative team with a deep understanding of each market we serve, utilizing our human-centered proprietary technology to provide the best experience in any situation for every one of us. With the trust that we built over the years, today Traveloka is the leading travel platform in the region, having a presence in 6 Southeast Asian markets, empowering millions of consumers to explore the world around them. Southeast Asia is home to around 670 million people with exciting economic prospects and unique set of challenges, which we believe that technology can be the enabler to address this opportunity and challenges in order to create more impact to the people, including democratizing access for financial inclusion, addressing sustainability in travel choices, and also increasing flexibility to provide more convenient products and services. Technology and innovation has shaped and reshaped travel landscape to be adaptive to consumers' dynamic needs and aspirations. Traveloka is focused on delivering products and services that are relevant in each market and each consumer's behaviors. The pandemic created unprecedented challenges for the travel and tourism sector, but also gave an opportunity to innovate and evolve. For example, it has changed the way people sell and transact online, and thus create an overall rise in digital inclusion in Southeast Asia, which is a vibrant and emerging market with over 400 million of internet users, and a booming digital economy The internet penetration rate in Southeast Asia alone is as high as over 70%. At Traveloka, we also learned that the technology, collaborations, and innovations are essential for every player in the industry. We need to address what is paramount to every one of us and how we can play a part in solving the problem that we face, building and maintaining a strong partnership with the governments, suppliers, and our stakeholders to ensure the revival of the travel and tourism sector. Technology has also been allowing us to provide innovative solutions. There's a real opportunity to collaborate and bring together the best of the industry, leveraging our complementary strengths to provide travelers with seamless, customized, and flexible travel experience, as well as accelerate the economic growth. The travel and tourism sector shows promising recovery progress despite uncertain post-COVID circumstances. If we look at the current trends, as travel restrictions are easing, there's a huge pent-up tourism demand regionally and actually globally as well. We're seeing the returns of marquee events in Southeast Asia, such as the current World Tourism Conference, the G20 in Indonesia, and the Time 100 event in Singapore, among many others. In fact, based on our data, staycation prevails as the strongest segments for domestic revenue. Local weekend destinations are seeing good take-up rate on our platform, where we see people traveling domestically, for example, from Kuala Lumpur to Langkawi, from Bangkok to Pattaya, Ho Chi Minh City to Phuong Thao. This in turn promotes local domestic economic recovery. The momentum is also in our favor, as we see that the pandemic presents us with a reset moment to address a long-standing challenges while also seizing a new opportunity in the travel industry. Using technology to ease travel activities, encourage environmental friendly behavior, and empower local communities. Those are the example, many of the examples that to show how a society thrives after a major crisis, becoming more resilient as we learn from our journey, and to innovate and transform to become better. It is solely up to us that this society to reimagine the future that we are going to be in. And I hope during this conference, transformational notions, concepts, and ideas will emerge to catalyze and forward innovation and tourism. For Traveloka, our journey doesn't stop here. People are once again consuming travel. We are optimistic about the travel recovery and so happy to help everyone to get out and travel again. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Sama-sama, Mr. Albert. We do have a question for you. Could you tell us about what you had to do to survive COVID, but also the current challenges you face and where you see support is needed?
I think the technology innovation is what enables us to thrive. Moving forward, we will continue to use that principle to provide more products and services for our consumers in our relevant markets that we serve. Thank you so much for the questions.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Albert of Traveloka. Okay, Melissa, since we have majority of the delegates here in the hall, are there any housekeeping announcements that we need to inform? I guess we're okay, right? So, all right, we're good. All right, next we shall introduce our next presenter, Ms. Rachel Lum, the co-founder of Loka Local. Now, Rachel is the co-founder and content and marketing lead of Loka Local, a technology platform specializing in virtual reality technology, 360-degree videos and visual storytelling, and a platform for bespoke travel VR content and audio-visual guides. She has 10 years of experience in digital marketing, advertising, and journalism. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Ms. Rachel Lum.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel, and I'm from Loka Local. So this morning, I'll be doing a bit of storytelling on our journey in Loka Local and how, especially in the past 2 years, we have navigated through the pandemic and did something different. So for those who know about Loka Local, especially before COVID, so we started in 2016 as the largest online marketplace for local experiences in Malaysia. So this means you can go on our website, discover local activities and workshops run by local experts with different backgrounds and different skills and stories to share. You can book them and actually experience Malaysia in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to experience. Malaysia is a multicultural country, and we wanted our experiences to reflect that. So here you can actually go on tours with indigenous guides who can show you different jungle survival skills. You can learn how to cook Indian food with a home chef. You can learn how to make joss sticks with the last traditional joss stick maker in Penang. And you can learn how to make beautiful wows with a kite maker from Kelantan. But all this changed in 2020, when obviously the COVID pandemic started. Because most of our customers, 80% of them are expats or foreigners, we actually noticed this impact early on, as early as January. And we noticed that bookings were starting to decline, and we wanted to act fast because we knew that this was something different and something that was about to change quite a lot. So the first thing we did in February, we started our local destination marketing service. We realized that domestic tourism would be the first to recover, the first to rebound, and we wanted to start getting people, locals especially, to explore their backyard and look at what Malaysia has to offer. So all our content was geared towards promoting less crowded destinations, such as small towns and villages. And we also invested in some equipment that allowed us to do, with me, 360 kind of virtual tours. So in that sense, we wanted people to see, eat, and play the local way, and as well as to support locals. And as well as that, because of this, we not only were able to promote some of our existing activities in all these little towns, we were also able to secure some advertising requests from hotels and restaurants. In March 2020, things changed again. This time, Malaysia announced a lockdown, and there were a lot of restrictions, especially with travel, and everything came to a standstill. So the first thing we did, we introduced online experiences to continue engaging our audience. And this is nothing new. This concept has been used by different platforms across the world. But more importantly, we used this time to learn from different experts from around the world about virtual reality. So we did this by doing several things. We started reading a lot, voraciously, and we also participated in a lot of different online virtual tours, things that would allow us to see how other people, other platforms were using this technology to do something different and which is in line with their own brand. One thing we realized about the travel industry is that those who have remained resilient and bounced back during COVID actually went back to their roots. And what I mean by that is that they leverage on their core strengths. So for us, our core strengths is in storytelling and technology. We've been telling stories about our local experts for many years. And on top of that, with our relationship with all these local experts, we were able to gain a more closer connection to what their culture was, their customs and traditions. So from there, in August, when the restrictions were lifted, our entire team picked up the skills for virtuality as fast as we could. So basically, we went out to different places in Malaysia. We started collecting all the content. We got the equipment. We figured out everything we needed to make it work. And what we realized was that, in a way, we were actually leveraging on what we knew before. Our team is made up of storytellers and tech experts who have an interest in travel, and they're also really interested in meeting new people, connecting them with them, and understanding their stories. So what VR was doing was actually just taking a framed storytelling experience and making it frameless in 360. So 2 weeks after the MCO was lifted, the Movement Control Order, we launched our virtual reality services by promoting all the 127 places in Malaysia that we have curated. These are from 9 different states. Our team actually had to go all out in Peninsular Malaysia to capture all this content and feature them on our website. And from there, we actually got a lot of traction. We got a lot of media talking about us because this was something that Malaysia, or in fact, has never seen before. And basically, from there, we started to get a bit more conversation going about virtual reality. During this time, we have a lot of local guides who have also approached us to find ways to sort of continue their business even during the lockdown. So what we did, we created different virtual experiences that could help our partners as they were going through these unprecedented times. We created them for the KL Heritage Walks, the Tanjung Tualang, it's an attraction in Perak State, the National Mosque, and the Ma Mary Indigenous Cultural Village. So they were able to use these virtual tours to promote outreach for their different organizations, create an alternative revenue stream. They were actually bringing guests around using this system. And even for like the cultural village, they actually used this to promote their cultural village to foreign students who weren't able to come in because of the lockdown. Within the hospitality industry, we have also created virtual tours for hotels, spas, wellness venues, restaurants, as well as MICE venues. So in a way, VR obviously is very flexible. It can go into many different industries within the same vertical. But in a time where tourism is in a standstill and players are maybe less likely to spend a lot on virtual reality, we also branch out to different things. So what we saw actually was the world was changing around us as well. We noticed that there was an increase in digital media consumption. There was a lot of talk about the metaverse and Web 3.0, which got a lot of conversation about it. The future is mobile. So by 2025, most of us in the world will probably have used a smartphone before, and it'll probably be an extension of ourselves. And within Southeast Asia, neighboring countries like Thailand, Singapore, and Vietnam are already using VR to promote tourism. But in Malaysia, this was relatively new. So because a lot of our industry players were not able to start spending yet, we went into different verticals as well. So for us, this was a little bit challenging because there was a lot of educating that we needed to do to raise awareness about virtuality and how it could be flexible enough to move into different industries, create different marketing initiatives. And after a lot of pitching, a lot of meeting different people, and a lot of sharing, we've managed to secure some opportunities in medical tourism, in education, industrial tourism, as well as created virtual museums and virtual shopping malls in Malaysia. But for us, at our very core, we are all storytellers. So we see virtual reality as a new form of storytelling. So here you can see two different virtual tours that we've created. one for Kota Kinabalu and another for Langkawi, which is in partnership with the Di-Rantau Digital Nomad Program. So within these experiences, we are able to curate the different videos, images, stories about all these places in line with the local community. So we've worked with different fishermen, village chiefs, locals that have stories to share about the area, and we turn them into something that you can view it on your phone, like a virtual reality guidebook. And this is like before you even go to travel, even during your travels. VR has been used to create UNESCO heritage sites. We use them to unearth them. This is in Lenggong, in Perak, where there are archaeological sites that some people may not necessarily immediately think to go to, or even some places that might not yet be open to the public. But basically for these areas, we are able to show them, okay, these are the small details about what the findings are in that area. These are things that you might not notice if you were to go there alone or without a guide. But we also understand that for different places, especially destinations like this, people aren't just going there to see those particular heritage sites. They want to know what the local community is like. They want to know what food there is, where to stay, what to do. And so if you see in the bottom left-hand corner, that's actually a lady. She's doing a traditional bedak sejok, so it's like a powder making. And it's one of the things that we collaborated with to ensure that the content is as rich as possible, to show that there's very different things you can do in this destination. Okay. VR is a creative playground for us. So we wanted to take more imaginative approaches to marketing with it. One of the things that we did was create a neighborhood guide. So what this does is, for certain hotels, they can use this guide, which has certain places near their hotel, send it to customers who have already booked with them, to show them all the different destinations, the cafes, the bars, and the heritage sites that are close to the hotel that locals will also like to go to. So in that sense, virtual reality is a way to engage with a new generation of travelers using a different approach. So a lot of the people that we worked with before are traditional artisans. And during these 2 years, actually some of them have told us they might not be able to continue with the business because there's no one else to take over their business. So these are some of the people we've worked with in Penang. This man here he makes like seal engrave, those seals to stamp. And we realized that virtual reality can be used to capture a moment in time. So even if it's as simple as creating a video where you can be immersed in that environment, see what it looks like, see him doing something that he's passionate about and has done for so many decades, and keep them as a way to secure their legacy for the future generation in a time where it might not exist anymore. Speaking of heritage, it is not just limited to the cultural heritage where you see in what people do. It's also in our nature, in our national geoparks. So these are some of the things that we have done for some geosites across Malaysia. So of course, some of these areas, people might not necessarily think, okay, I want to see a geopark, maybe unless you're a researcher or a geologist. But through VR, we can show them a different side of the country that they have never seen before, and point out the very small little details that maybe a geologist might notice and is actually quite interested in. And actually, a lot of these stories are very, very interesting once you get to know them. So later on this year, we are also launching an art gallery, a virtual art gallery, where we can promote hybrid events, hybrid conventions and exhibitions. So this is something that is actually in the works already. We are able to create an art exhibition online, as it were, in their physical museum now. It would support their local talents and artists so people can visit the physical museum. But if you're not in the state or you're not able to, you can just go online and check out their work and even purchase them. And finally, I'm quite glad to share that as recently, we've actually introduced 22 different virtual experiences on our website, spanning 13 different states and 3 federal territories in Malaysia, as well as several different museums across Malaysia. And we really hope you can look at some of them and let me know what you think about them. So I want to end this with a sort of lesson about what we have learned during this experience, and it boils down to 3 things: adapt, upskill, evolve. Adapt by looking at what's happening around you, looking at all the travel trends. Upskill, continue learning, continue reading, continue figuring out what you can do to build your skills. And finally, evolve. Look at what your core strengths are and do something different with it. So this is the QR code for our website if you want to check out some of the experiences. We hope you like them and you can discover Malaysia from anywhere and any time you want. And if you have any opportunities, do get in touch with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. Could we ask you a couple of questions that came in from Slido?
Yeah.
So we have a question from someone in the audience, I would assume. How big is Loka Local's team of storytellers? And given the speed, volume, and quality of creative content curated, what is the age composition of the team?
Okay. So right now we have about 20 storytellers and tech experts, and we're not just based in Malaysia. We have a team of Malaysians also in Indonesia. I would say our team are pretty young, like up to 30-something, yeah. So we are all like really hungry to travel. We're hungry to find out about the different stories across Malaysia. So I hope that answers your question.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Rachel Lum.
All right,
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, Melissa, moving on. And I love this presenter's title.
I was just going to say, this is kind of like a dream job, a Chief People and Purpose Officer. So next up we have Miss Natalie Kidd of Intrepid Travel, and she is the Chief People and Purpose Officer. Natalie Kidd is with Intrepid Travel, the world's largest provider of adventure travel experiences. In 2020, she moved from the role of Chief Operating Officer to her current role, responsible for the development and implementation of the company's people and sustainability strategies. Natalie has recently joined the board of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council as a director. Please give it up for Natalie Kidd.
I'm starting with a world-famous photograph. This shot shows the Middle East through Africa down to Antarctica. It was the first photograph of our planet taken by the crew of Apollo 17 in 1972. It is called the Blue Marble Shot. Thank you for inviting me here today to talk about solutions in travel and the steps that Intrepid has been taking and will continue to take. Steps that we all can, we all must take to preserve our planet that is so beautifully captured here. For those of us in the travel and tourism industry, we have a front row seat to the climate disaster that our world is facing. There has been lots of talk about the pandemic, but the climate crisis is going to have a far greater and far longer impact to all of us. It is the actions that we choose to take, the actions that we don't take, and the tools that we adapt that will shape our future. So, as I was introduced, I'm Natalie Kidd. I'm the Chief People and Purpose Officer for Intrepid. Although in 2 days' time, on the 1st of December, I actually move into a new role as Intrepid's Managing Director for Asia. So it gives me great pleasure to be here in Kota, Kinabalu today and being able to speak to you all. For those of you not familiar with Intrepid, we are a global tour operator. We run over 1,000 different itineraries all around the world on all 7 continents. Our trips are small group adventures run in some of our favourite destinations around the world, from Vietnam to Morocco to Peru, and of course here in Malaysia. We also run month-long overland tours through sub-Saharan Africa, across the continent of South America, through to short 2 to 3 hour walking tours in some of our favourite cities around the world. What we do differently at Intrepid to many other tour operators is we do it all ourselves. From creating the product, to selling the product, to our guides delivering our end product. It is done through Intrepid staff and Intrepid teams, guides, leaders, all around the world. We have over 30 offices that create the Intrepid Global Network, including our own team, Intrepid Malaysia, who are based right here in Kota Kinabalu. And a number of our staff I know are here today. Intrepid is also the world's largest B Corp. B Corp, or benefits corporations, if you haven't heard of them, think of Patagonia. We are a rapidly growing community of businesses, over 5,000 now, but increasing very quickly. We are businesses who are independently assessed and certified for their standards in both social and environmental performance. We're also committed to public transparency in all that we do. So every year at Intrepid, we release our integrated annual report. It's on our website for everybody to see. And that is not just about our financial performance. It talks about everything we do as a business, our ESG, our positive impacts that we make, but importantly, we also talk to the negative impacts. We talk to what we have achieved, and we talk to what we know we need to do better in. I have been fortunate enough to have over 17 years experience with Intrepid now. And during those 17 years, I've been lucky to travel widely. I have worked alongside many of those teams all around the world. But in doing so, I have also seen the changes. By working with our operations teams and hearing what they are dealing with, I am increasingly concerned about our future, not only as a tourism industry, but as the human race. Tourism is often very seasonal, and we rely on our in-depth knowledge. We know, or we used to know, when to expect the rains in East Africa, when we could reliably fly into the Himalayas to start the trekking season, or when to avoid the coast of Sarawak because it was typhoon season. But these things that we know are no longer true. The rains come earlier and they're far more intense, or they don't come at all. In the last month, actually it was September, it was the September incident report for Intrepid. We had volcanic eruption, earthquake, flash floods, typhoon, hurricane, and a wildfire in 1 month. I'm sure those of you in the room are also experiencing some of these changes. If you are not seeing them with your business, your travelling customers will have travel disruptions. But it's not too late. We can still achieve a 1.5 degree future as laid out in the Paris climate agreements. We know we need to reduce our carbon emissions by 45% by 2030, and in doing so then pushing beyond that to net zero in 2050. But it is going to take change, it is going to take concerted effort, and it needs to start now. And we need to do it together. During the pandemic, when we couldn't be talking to people about the trips we were running, what we did at Intrepid was really focus on our planning, looking at the climate disaster as something that was going to be longer lasting, because there is no vaccine for our climate situation. So we did our planning and we spent time talking within the industry, talking to our customers about what needs to happen. We took some of our own learnings and we spoke to other members of the travel organisation, the travel industry, to look at what could be done. And we put our learnings together. We even released a toolkit for other organisations in travel and tourism to learn from us, to take steps to start combating what we're seeing in front of us. However, as we go out and talk to other organisations, often we hear things like, oh, but Intrepid's a big business, you have a lot of resources, we cannot afford to do the steps that you're doing. Well, I ask you this, can you afford not to? So Intrepid was founded over 33 years ago by two 20-something guys from Melbourne, Darryl Wade and Jeff Manchester. They met at university and then they went on the trip of a lifetime with a group of friends. They took an old garbage truck, they converted it and drove across Africa. They camped, they went to small villages far away from the tourist trail, and they thought, maybe there's a form of travel here that is different. Not backpacking, not big bus tours, a new form of travel that really gets to know a country through meeting the people in undiscovered parts of different countries. In a way, you could say that initial interactions they were having with small villages are what we now talk about when we talk about community-based tourism. So in the first year, Intrepid took 47 customers to one country, Thailand. Over the next couple of years, that's 47 travellers became 1,000 travellers. We travelled across Asia, and eventually we took people globally. As Intrepid started to grow, our founders saw that tourism really could have a positive impact. Tourism could be a force for good, but tourism could also have negative impacts. And so they vowed early on that it was not just what we did, but how we did it. We were one of the first travel companies to have what we called then a responsible travel department. We now have gone on to develop that to call it sustainability. We now call it purpose. And that purpose team looks at what our impacts are and how we try and improve the impacts that we make. When I joined the company 17 years ago, that year, nothing to do with my arrival, but that year marked the start of our climate journey. As a senior manager, I was given a book to read called The Weather Makers by Tim Flannery. Our senior managers read this book, and this is in the days when climate change was not a term we heard every day like we do now. But we started thinking, this is something that is going to impact us. We didn't know what to do about it, so we started to learn. We started to engage with experts and bring them in to help us. We started to measure what our negative impact was on the environment, on the climate. We decided to try and reduce our emissions, but we also made the move to start offsetting our emissions. And we became one of the first travel companies to be certified as carbon neutral back in 2010. But that was just the start. Over the next 10 years, we continued to invest in sustainability, continue to invest in purpose, and we found that the more we did that and the more we talked to that, the more we grew. Our top line sales and our bottom line profitability. So we firmly believe that being a good business can be good for business. But we know now that we must do more. And what was market leading in 2010, being carbon offset, is not good enough in the 2020s. We now need rapid decarbonisation as the solution. So in 2020, we were very proud to become the first travel company to have verified approved science-based targets. And we strongly recommend that the industry needs to come up on this journey with us. We need to start taking action. Yesterday we mentioned the Glasgow Declaration. That is a great place to start. But we really encourage people to sign up to science-based targets which help you measure your emissions and set what you need to do for your individual company. What level of reduction do you need to head into a 1.5 degree world and into a future that is net zero? Of the companies across many industries that have committed to science-based targets already, only, I think it's now about 75 are in travel and tourism. And of those, only 29 have approved targets. And some of those companies are fantastic companies doing great work. But where is everyone else? We're starting to feel rather lonely on this journey, and we cannot do it alone. We know that the work we need to do is difficult, and there are long-term solutions, but it doesn't mean we can't taking small change, small actions now. And it is ultimately the consolidation of many, many small activities that will start to form the solution for us as we go forward. In our offices, where we can, we've moved to renewable energy, we've stopped printed brochures, that reduces the waste. But on our itineraries, something as simple as changing one included activity from a meat-based meal to a plant-based meal has an impact. The World Tourism and the World Travel and Tourism Council tells us that between 8 to 11% of global emissions are created by our industry. Of course, the focus is on transport, and we look at aviation. We're not suggesting that we don't travel, we don't fly. I live in Australia, and flying regularly is a part of my life. But we do suggest we need to be mindful. As the aviation industry steps up and looks to renewable energies, sustainable aviation fuels, that's heading in the right direction, but it will take time. So one of the actions that we have taken at Intrepid last year, we looked at our top 50 selling trips, and we identified all of those flights that were 90 minutes or less. And we set our team to finding alternatives. Some of them we couldn't change, but some of them we could. An example here is we run many trips through Vietnam, and we used to always fly from Hanoi to Da Nang to take people to the ancient town of Hoi An. We can still have a great experience by giving people an overnight train experience. It reduces the carbon emissions on that trip. And it is the sum of many of these small actions that are going to make the impact difference for us. In Sri Lanka earlier in the year, finding fuel was very difficult. So we started looking for solutions, and we found some people with EVs. So we swapped out our airport transfers from regular cars into electric vehicles. And then when the opportunity presented itself to run a very small group, we were able to put them in electric vehicles. And we ran what we believe was the first fully electric-powered trip around Sri Lanka. Because we measure our emissions, and measuring your emissions is the start. Once you measure them, you know the size of the problem, you know what needs to be reduced, and you can then start taking action. We know in 2019, we released 35,152 tonnes of carbon. 80% of it came from our supply chain. Transport, hotels, meals, activities. So for us to achieve our committed targets and our reductions, we need to work with you, our suppliers. And whether you're a supplier to Intrepid or to other tour companies, this is a conversation and a collaboration that needs to happen. We will increasingly be working with our supply chain to assist them and collaborate to find what solutions we can put into place jointly to help us reduce the impact of what we do. I started off with the blue marble shot. Here is another picture of our planet, taken by NASA a couple of years ago, 50 years almost after that initial picture. And you can see the clarity. You can see the improvements in technology. And it is improvements in technology that will help us solve this. Some of those improvements have already happened. Some of those innovations are yet to come, but we cannot wait for them. We need to start now. We know over the last 8 years, we have experienced the 8 hottest years on record. The next 8 years will determine what our beautiful planet looks like into the future. It is up to all of us to collaborate. The solutions are there, but we need to start decarbonising. We need to start taking those small steps. And collectively, small steps will take us on the journey to tell us what our planet looks like in the next 50 years. Terima kasih.
Sama-sama. Thank you so much, Natalie. We have one question for you. How do you recommend businesses to get started on their sustainability or decarbonization journey?
First step is to educate yourselves. And we started educating ourselves in climate 17 years ago. And we've been talking about it a lot. I think the knowledge is there that we need to do something, but we need to transfer that into action. 3 things I can recommend for you to look at. If you Google Intrepid Travel Decarbonisation, it will take you to a site that we have prepared with not just our information, but links to lots of information out there and a step-by-step toolkit to help you get started. Go to the Glasgow Declaration, that also has incredible information, and sign up. And thirdly, I would look at science-based targets, but you need to measure to know what it is you need to change. But don't be put off. We need to take that first step and then another step. Start with small steps. That's the way to travel and the way for us to achieve our journey that we must take. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Natalie Kidd of Intrepid Travel. Well, Melissa, we'd like to just say hello to everyone who is joining us via MOTAC TV and also on Facebook and YouTube as well. Terima kasih kerana sudi bersama kami, and you're joining us live from Sabah International Convention Centre at the World Tourism Conference 2022. Gosh, I'm not even a TV person.
And on that note though, so for the rest of you who'd like to rewatch what the last 2 days have been, you can actually log on to YouTube and look for MOTAC TV and, see if you can see yourself in the crowd and say, hi mom, So yeah, you can check that out even after the conference has ended.
Yes, indeed. All right, Melissa, let's move on to our next presenter. Ms. Jessica Yu, the co-founder and director of Sticky Rice Travel, based right here in Kota, Kinabalu. I have a little storytelling to tell you here. Now, corporate world dropout, Jessica left the constraints of the corporate desk to head back to her hometown in search of something more. But the journey home was longer than expected, as she made a detour backpacking through Europe, Asia, and then residing in Vietnam for a few years as a rock climbing assistant, before finally making the move back home to Kota Kinabalu. And once home, she was quick to plunge into the deep blue ocean, becoming a dive master in just 8 months. She has an inescapable itch for the outdoors, but has found a balance by spending half her time at the Sticky Rice office and the other out guiding National Geographic Adventures Indochina destinations. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Jessica Yu.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm here to talk about how our values, or being a values-based organization, delicate ecosystem and environment, we realize that all sorts of travel have impact. You can have positive impact on the traveler, but at the same time, you also have negative impact onto the environment. Yesterday, we saw some of the speakers talked about the biggest polluter when it comes to travel. You're talking about air travel, and then you're talking about SUV. Recently, I was at the ATA Travel Summit in Lugano in Switzerland. And sustainability is a theme that has been talked about for many, many years now. In some areas and some market segment, it may be more relevant to others. So what we did when we started Sticky Rice Travel was that we said we want to be committed to ensuring that our negative impact on the environment as well as the socials are carefully thought about. So with that, we have, with Sticky Rice Travel, we say when you come and travel with us, you're on a meaningful adventure. And that's because we really go into detail into thinking about all the touch points. You know, when you travel, what are we trying to do at every touch point to reduce the negative impact of travel? When COVID started looming, I was in the UK. We had just gone to a birding fair in the US and visiting some of our partners in London. At that point of time, with our market segment, it didn't seem like it was something that will be relevant to us. It touched us quite late, but when I came back sometime in February and early March, we started seeing something different. I remember being in a subway in London traveling, and I really needed to cough. And there was a lot of fear at the time, you know, because it was largely perceived as, you know, an Asian virus. And it was, you know, very, very interesting at the time. But when we came back as early as, I think, beginning of March, we started seeing, you know, cancellations and postponements. At Sticky Rice Travel, we have always had a very strong company culture based on values. With those values, one of the things that's very important is communication and transparency. We were about 50 people at the time. Our growth has always been organic over 10 years. We started with a 2-person team, but then at some point, when we got to 15 or something, we really started looking into middle management because we realized that we cannot really pass on the values without really working collaboratively with our middle management. So at the time, we started, over the next few slides, I'm going to show you the actual slides that we shared with our people of what are our steps, what are our strategies, what's happening with the company. We used the HEART framework of communication. We've always been a very empathetical company. That's a big value. But we continue to, you know, focus more on humanizing the company. Also educating our people about the changes that are going to take place because there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of uncertainty. What we did was we actually was very, very transparent with our people on what will happen. And this was very, very important. Outside of crisis, you really need to communicate with your people. A lot of the times we communicate with our clients, sure, but the backbone of the company, the people, we needed to manage that because the first thing that we thought about was what is going to happen to our people. And can we actually make decisions that will keep to the values that we've always said, you know, we would adhere to. By being very transparent and, you know, keeping everybody informed about what was going to happen. And at the time, we laid off 60% very quickly. It was as early as April, end of March, if I'm not wrong. We informed everybody about what we would do. And, you know, I remember it was a very stressful time for us because it's never easy to be the leader of an organization, especially when it comes to crisis. We had to make some very difficult decisions of letting people go and also follow through with how else we would support them at the time. So transparency matters. I don't think that at the time our people expected us to share more than what we usually share outside of the COVID-19 crisis. But because we had to let go of a huge chunk of our people, we needed to share, or we made the decision to share the thought process that led to the decisions. We said we needed to ensure the continuity of the company. And in order to do that, with the prognosis of travel, this is what we have to do. So we actually showed and shared with everybody the losses of income and, you know, why we had to let people go. Fast forward to post-COVID. When the borders opened, we had a very short period of time to prepare. I think the borders reopened sometime in April. I think we found out about it maybe just 3 weeks before. During COVID, we were quite surprised with how understanding and supportive our people were. Once we get through the crazy madness of reopening, which was April, May, and June, we were quite surprised. And if I may say, I think that when COVID hit, we had quite a large reserve. And that's probably one of the reasons why we were able to weather through that difficult period of time. But money in itself doesn't solve everything. The fact that we had a team that came back post-COVID, that was very, very, there was a lot of collaboration. There was a lot of loyalty and trust in what we do. And there was a lot of trust as well in the market segment that we were in. So with this being here, I attribute a lot of that to the resilience of our people. You know, they had to go through a lot of changes, beginning with, the layoff of almost more than half the team. And then, we had a lot of period of opening, closing, and reopening. And then a year into the pandemic, we had to shave down further of that existing 40% team to ensure that we can weather the rest of the way. So as we restart, we now take the time to rebuild at our own pace. With us having a good brand, when people come, our partners come knocking at our door, before, when you are so engrossed in the day-to-day, it's easy to lose sight of the values that we held on to before. So even with our values before, I think because, we were just going. We had a strong culture because of our values, and our people knew that. And due to that, we had a very strong team that had high productivity. But somewhere along the way, we kind of lost sight of what the company was all about. And with the company, when we started it, it is not just about maximizing profit. It is also about building a good business that is able to give back and do the right thing for the impact that travel can bring. Today, we try to keep track and stay focused on what we believe in. And our triple bottom line is very important to us because what we have learned is that had we not had people that had the buy-in, we wouldn't have been able to restart again. Also with travel, I think, we've heard speakers talk about sustainability yesterday and today. We're members of ATA, and a lot of the times when we talk about travel, we talk about the impact that travel has and what we will do about it. Natalie talked about how some companies say, oh yeah, but if you're a large corporation, then you have the resources to do certain things. At Sticker Rice Travel, we're not large, but a lot of the times it's the intention, it's the choice that you make between, making that additional profit at the expense of something, and whether that's your people or the planet. And I think that in today's climate with changes, it is very important that we relook at what kind of businesses we're building. Whether we like it or not, we are dealing with humans. And it's very important to humanize your business and nail down your values, because that is the thing that is going to create a healthy culture for you. So with that, I leave you with our values. What are yours?
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. We have one question coming in from Slido. Someone has commented, we appreciate your lessons learned during the hard years facing the pandemic. Now, what can all of us do for future unpredictable pandemic and other crises?
I think that it is very important that we think about resilience when it comes to business. And when you talk about resilience, we need to think about the people that work for the organization. There's a lot of research that says a values-based organization is more nimble and more successful than another organization that hasn't got that. The thing is, if you have a well-defined culture and well-defined sets of values, when it comes to crisis, it really helps a lot when it comes to making decisions that will work for the company.
Thank you, Jessica. And I hope that answers the question of whoever posted on Slido. Thank you for your questions. We wish we could take more. But do note that these speakers are around for the rest of the day. So if you do have a question, a burning question for them, do not hesitate to come up to them and ask your questions. Yes, Ben?
Yes, indeed. And before we break for lunch, we have a lucky draw session. But Melissa, I guess both of us can just give a few takeaways here. What are, just in a few words,
what has happened? Yeah, what has it been so far? So session 3, not to play favorites, but I have to say this has been one of my favorite sessions because I'm a big fan of narratives and storytelling. And what we can take away, I think, Ben, is the power of the narrative in the tourism industry, as Gary and Brent mentioned earlier, and how the travel experience is now all about engagement and connection. And we talk about the merging of worlds, virtual and real, to create a more dynamic travel experience. And also, I think it's important for us to talk about the travel and tourism industry to become more inclusive at more levels. Travels for us, make it more travel-friendly for senior citizens, more women involved in tourism and travel. And as Natalie mentioned about solutions in travel, the climate crisis, I think, is something that must be addressed at all levels, and it's urgent. Decarbonization, I do agree, is one of the paths forward. And finally, Jessica talking about people being at the center and the heart when it comes to purpose and values when we talk about tourism. Whew. How about that? Did I kind of sum it up?
I think we covered everything. Well done, Melissa.
I was paying attention, see?
Great listener right there. And for your information, ladies and gentlemen, I think majority of the speakers have, social media pages and even their organizations as well. Please feel free to just type in their organization's name on the search box in Facebook, TikTok, or Instagram, wherever, whatever your social media preferences are, and hopefully you'll be able to connect much more with them. But That's why we're here at World Tourism Conference.
That's
They're
right.
physically here. It'll be best if you're able to connect with them in person. All right, Melissa, let's go ahead and begin our lucky draw session here.
Yes, again, we're going to make you work for your lunch.
2:30. We hope that you'll be able to make it into the hall before that. Our goal is to try to start on time. Please don't move from downstairs at 2:30 and making your way back here. It'll be we'll be appreciative if you'll be able to come here
That's
just
right.
before that.
Or the bell will come and chase you into the hall as it did earlier.
Yes,
so
indeed.
please, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy lunch. We'll see you back here at 2:20 p.m.
Selamat
Thank you.
menjamu selera. Bon appétit.